12 years ago, in 2013, a young woman named Sandy and I were both attending university. I was in Canada and she was in the United States, so I didn't know Sandy at the time. But 10 years later, she would become a patient of mine in the Stanford Brain Stimulation Lab. I'm now a neuroscientist in Stanford's Department of Psychiatry, leading clinical trials using advanced forms of non-invasive brain stimulation. As I got to know Sandy, I learned that she was an athlete. She had a great family, good friends, she did well in school. But I also learned that she was starting to struggle to maintain attention while focusing on her tasks at school. She was starting to feel fatigued most days, feeling sad most days, and occasionally even suicidal. That year, along with 17 million people in the United States, Sandy learned that she was suffering from major depression disorder. After being diagnosed, she was prescribed an antidepressant medication and therapy. Like most people in the United States suffering from depression, this is the standard first-line treatment. So let me ask you a question. How many people in the room know somebody who has suffered from a mental health condition? How many of us know someone who has tried therapy as a treatment for that condition? And how many of us know somebody who has tried medication as a mental health treatment? And how many of us know someone who has tried precision brain stimulation as a mental health treatment? So you can see there's a clear and massive disparity in the room between medication, therapy, and brain stimulation. Despite brain stimulation being one of the most rapid and effective treatment options for depression, it's still widely underused. Throughout the course of this talk, I'm going to tell you about the past, the present, and the future of psychiatry, and how we were able to eliminate Sandy's depression by rewiring her brain. So I'll start with Psychiatry 1.0, originating back in the early 1900s. Psychiatry 1.0 was dominated by forms of talk therapy, under the understanding that psychiatric illness was some sort of illness of the mind, something intangible, and a way of accessing the mind was through speech. Therapy in all of its forms remains an effective treatment option for millions of patients every year in America. However, it can take weeks, months, or years to be effective. And at least 50% of patients don't receive an adequate relief from therapy alone, meaning it's not effective in completely eliminating their depression, especially with those who have severe forms of depression. In comes Psychiatry 2.0. Originating in the 1950s, this was dominated by forms of pharmacotherapy, or the use of medication, like antidepressants. Again, this type of therapy helps millions of patients every year in America, but at least 50% of those patients don't receive an adequate relief from their depression. So if this many people, that is about 50%, 8.5 million Americans, are not receiving relief using the standard first-line treatments, this is what we call treatment-resistant depression, then how do we help 8.5 million people? I believe the answer is something called non-invasive brain stimulation, and that falls under Psychiatry 3.0, the current era of psychiatry. Psychiatry 3.0 is characterized by the use of tools that were traditionally thought of as tools for neurologists. We started to think about psychiatric conditions as brain-based conditions. So we can use tools like MRI brain scanners, which is a magnetic resonance image where we can take a personalized image of your brain, and tools like brain stimulation devices such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, to rewire or stimulate the brain. So we can scan the brain to assess it and identify what's happening in the brain, and then we can treat that by rewiring it using brain stimulation. Once we accepted and learned that psychiatric illness have a brain-based origin, then we can identify the areas we need to stimulate to treat them. So after we bridged this connection between psychiatry and neurology to form neuropsychiatry, this really changed everything. It allowed us to think differently about psychiatric illness and come up with new treatments. Now I want you to imagine, suddenly, on your way home from work, a vicious dog lunges at you. It's baring its teeth, it's growling, it's angry. You become terrified. And in that terrifying experience, your brain experiences a state of fear. You're fearful, your heart rate elevates, you become sweaty. This is a natural response. Your brain is scared. Your psychological state is scared. It's totally normal to feel that way. But if you go home at the end of the day and you're safe, but you can't stop thinking about this dog, and you're constantly ruminating about this terrifying experience, you have nightmares about this experience, we might say that your brain is stuck in a fear state. And if your brain is stuck in a fear state for months, we call that post-traumatic stress disorder. Similarly, if you're constantly feeling fatigued and unmotivated and guilty and sad and maybe suicidal, we might say your brain is stuck in a depressed state. And that's called major depression disorder. So I want you to imagine some different psychological states of mind that we're all familiar with. For example, feeling happy, feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling anxious. Also, very normal states of mind that everybody here experiences. As you go throughout your day, your mind and your brain are constantly changing based on what you're doing at a given time. We experience all of these types of mind states. And we understand now that these states of mind or psychological states are given rise to by our brain states. And if your brain gets stuck in one of these states, this can lead to a psychiatric illness. So I want to go back to my story. About 11 years ago, shortly after Sandy was first diagnosed with depression, I was studying cognitive science with a specialization in cognition and psychology in Ottawa, Canada. I was attending a lecture with Dr. Ash Asuda. He was telling us about this cool new brain stimulation technology that his colleague at Oxford uses that allows him to manipulate brain activity. They can put these magnets over your head that can turn on or turn off different areas of the brain. Can turn up or down different brain activity. This is the first time I've ever heard about brain stimulation, and I became fascinated. I was a young scientist. I was very excited about this idea. I had a lot of ideas about what you could do with this. I became a bit obsessed, so much so that a year later, I would start my PhD in clinical neuroscience and ultimately spend till now and hopefully another 20 years focusing on this for the rest of my career. So in 2014, I began my PhD, and we were learning about brain stimulation technology. It had been around, but it was still kind of a new territory. There was a lot to learn. We learned that fast pulses could allow you to increase brain activity, or we could use slow pulses to decrease brain activity. We learned that we could use a precision approach that allows us to scan each person's brain. So using this precision medicine idea, I can look at your brain, and I can specifically identify what activity is abnormal that's leading to your psychiatric symptoms. And then we could rewire that activity by building new bridges in the brain with brain stimulation. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about the word or term brain stimulation. Like me, when you first hear brain stimulation, it might sound a little intimidating. Brain stimulation. Earlier forms of brain stimulation have been portrayed in the media by Hollywood to maybe look a little bit like this. Potentially torturous or barbaric. TV shows like HBO's The Penguin or movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest have unfortunately provided a negative stigma to things like brain stimulation, when indeed it is a very effective and safe treatment. In reality, it looks a little more like this. So I want to just take that pause to remember that, the way it's portrayed in the media is not how it is in real life. It's a very safe treatment with very minimal side effects. And this is portraying something called electroconvulsive therapy, which is also an effective treatment, but it's not exactly what we do. Like I said, what we do is something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a very precise form of brain stimulation that stimulates an exact region of the brain. We could do it in a typical doctor's office. We could do it in a room like this. It's that safe. So let's jump to the year 2023. In 2023, Sandy had been suffering at this point with depression on and off for about 10 years. In those 10 years, Sandy had tried hundreds of hours of therapy, thousands of pills, countless different medications. Sometimes she would get some relief from these treatments, sometimes not at all. This is what we call, again, treatment-resistant depression. And a lot of people who experience treatment-resistant depression, like Sandy, begin to feel quite hopeless. They feel like they have really tried everything. After decades of suffering, and you've tried all these treatments and nothing seems to work, those feelings of hopelessness, sadly, sometimes lead to feelings or thoughts related to suicide. When I met Sandy, she was feeling suicidal. She felt she would rather die than continue living the way that she was feeling. These feelings are fatal. Indeed, they're more fatal than car crashes. These are both terrible statistics, but most people are surprised to learn that last year, 50,000 people in America died by suicide, compared to 42,000 who died in car crashes. And think about a car crash for a moment. What happens when you're in a car crash? It's treated like an emergency. An ambulance can come, they can take you to an emergency room. In the emergency room, doctors and nurses can rush to help you. If you go into cardiac arrest, the nurses, the doctors, they can do CPR. They could use a defibrillator to restart your heart. A defibrillator is a stimulation device. But what happens when you're in a psychiatric emergency? We don't have a lot of good options to help these people. So we need to start thinking about psychiatric illness and psychiatric emergencies the same way that we think about physical illness, as an emergency. But in order to do that, we need more rapid-acting treatment options. So in comes Stanford neuromodulation therapy. Invented in my lab, the Stanford Brain Stimulation Lab, by my mentor, Dr. Nolan Williams, Stanford neuromodulation therapy is a precision brain stimulation approach that uses a unique brain scan for each person to identify the exact area of the brain that we need to stimulate so that we can help alleviate those symptoms of depression. It requires patients to receive 10-minute sessions of brain stimulation per day for 5 days. So that's 50 sessions in 1 week. This is an intensive treatment protocol, but it's very important because of how fast it works and because of how successful it is. Over the last several years, we've run many clinical trials with hundreds of patients, including randomized controlled trials. And in those years, we've been able to successfully eliminate the depression of 80% of our patients in an average of 2.6 days. I want to take a pause for that. Patients who've been suffering for years, sometimes over a decade, who have all the patients that we've seen have treatment resistance. That means they've tried medication, they have tried therapy without relief, severe forms of depression, and 80% of them, we eliminated that in 2.6 days. Since 2021, we've conducted over 20,000 treatments using this approach here on campus in the Stanford Brain Stimulation Lab. So this is happening today, right now. As we move forward, we're looking at other opportunities for this technology. We're exploring how we can use this technique to treat other psychiatric illness, like obsessive-compulsive disorder, addiction, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. As long as we can identify the area of the brain that we need to stimulate, then we can rewire it to treat those symptoms. Now, I believe in medication. I believe in therapy. But we all know that these solutions don't work for everybody or every situation. So Sandy joined one of our clinical trials. And after suffering for over 10 years, after just 30 sessions of brain stimulation, in her words, we saved Sandy's life. She finally felt back to her normal self. She woke up that day feeling happy, feeling ready to tackle her day, enthusiastic about seeing her family, enthusiastic about telling us about how good she felt, excited that she woke up not thinking about dying. This was a remarkable change for her that really, for the weeks to come, led to her changing her whole life. She started to get back into her hobbies again, getting back into sports again. As excited and as grateful as Sandy was, she was also frustrated. Frustrated to know that she had suffered for so long when there was a rapid solution available. It's always rewarding for me to know that I can go into work and think that maybe one day, while I'm there, on a normal day in the office, to potentially save a life. So I'm here with a message from Sandy, a message of hope and perseverance, that if you or someone you know is suffering from a mental health condition, to please consider some of these alternative treatment options. Sandy's story is one of success of Psychiatry 3.0. It is one of perseverance and hope. So please, spread the word. Spread Sandy's story. And you too may save a life. Thank you so much.